Good morning, welcome to day 36 of the lockdown coronavirus diaries of Geriatric 1944, me, Jonathan King. I've had an awful lot of messages about the saccharine track I put on. Do you remember my version of Sugar Sugar, which was sort of a heavy metal version of the old bubblegum song? And I thought underneath this, I'd play another one of my releases, which was called Silver Cannon. Long before it became a really popular classical item, I did Pachelbel's Silver, or what was it called originally? Pachelbel's, I can't remember the original, but you'll recognise the theme as Silver Cannon, which was the follow-up, I think, to the saccharine track. Never did very much, but it was very nice and instrumental. Tune I always thought was a super tune, and in fact I featured it in one of my movies. Now I've not pointed you in the direction of some of the movies I made. I mainly started making movies, they're very much homemade movies with a budget of zero or sometimes less than zero, usually without any actors. If they did have actors, they were paid the absolute minimum daily monies, and they were usually either amateurs or professionals who were prepared to do work for almost nothing. The reason I started them was it dawned on me very early on, after the scandal broke, that I was a vile pervert. I'm not, by the way. I'm innocent, and I'm still appealing to get my conviction quashed, as I was found not guilty in 2018, which trial revealed all sorts of incredible evidence that the 2001 verdicts were not just unsafe, but totally 100% incorrect. But it dawned on me that from that point, when the media picked up on it, suddenly, instead of being a major pop star of the 60s or a top producer of the 70s or a TV personality and host of the 80s or even a top music executive of the 90s who saved Eurovision and saved the Brits, which had been a disaster before I took over, all of those things were abandoned and I became a vile pervert, and I was well aware that the media would never ever have me on again in any capacity, would never cover anything I wrote or said, because I was now, from 2001 onwards, a vile pervert, and therefore to be ignored at all costs. They've not totally managed to do that, but I knew that was the way they were going to go. So rather than try and change things, and they were unchangeable, I was always aware that no more than 5% of people would ever regard me as anything other than a vile pervert. I switched to using the online ways. Back in the 90s, we'd started the tip sheet and the forum, King of Hits, that people could make comments on and read, and we got the most enormous reaction. It was originally based on a site called The Velvet Rope in America, which just basically tipped good music, but also talked about behind-the-scenes things in the industry. And that's what I found most interesting, which managing director was good, or which head of a label was competent, or which A&R person or promotion person was good. The only people we really championed were Richard Russell at XL, who went on to find Adele, and Simon Cowell. They were our two big champions. But anyway, so from the middle 90s, we had the sites, Tipsheet and kingofhits.com, and I started putting messages on there. After I became a vile pervert and ended up in Her Majesty's Prisoner's State, it was great fun, actually, because every week the Sunday papers usually would carry some completely fictional story about me being moved from one prison to another, or being beaten up in the showers, or any of the usual rubbish stories they publish, just sort of automatically. And then I would have the numbers, the private numbers of all the editors of the national newspapers. If they changed them, I'd always get the new ones within a day. And I'd immediately put up on the site, this story is rubbish and this is why, and please call the editor of the paper and tell him you know it's rubbish and why is he printing lies in his newspaper. It drove the editors out of their minds. Every Monday morning, they'd get into work and the phone would go, quite often 200 or 300 times during the day, complaining about something they'd written, which was a lie about Jonathan King. They finally just stopped printing any stories, but it did, I know, because I had first-hand reports, drive them all out of their minds. Anyway, I knew that online was the only way to go, so when I came out of prison, I started working more online, and I used the site to put true stories across and make commentaries. We were still getting about 10,000 people a day visiting the site and reading all the comments. And I then started making movies. And one of the first movie I made was called Vile Pervert the Musical, which was my idea of what happened back in 2000, or before that even, and the verdict in 2001. And that did incredibly well. Last time I looked, it had well over 3 million full-length views, because it's now got its own site, its own dedicated site. Most people look at it on that, but it's also hugely available on YouTube and Vimeo and all the other stupid sites that exist. And they love free movies, because most movies you've got to pay a big copyright fee for and all that. Mine is completely free. I just wanted to get the message through. So it was featured everywhere. And as I said, it had well over probably about 4 million full-length views by now. And then I made various other ones. I made different levels of the Vile Pervert one. I made another one called Vile Pervert, a sequel, which was when Max Clifford got done, because it was ironic since he started the whole thing into my investigation. Then Vile Pervert, The Truth Awakens, when they published the Henriquez report, which said an awful lot of the things that the police had done wrong back in 2000, 2001, and were also continuing to do wrong in the case that they started in 2015, of which I was eventually acquitted on all charges, and the trial collapsed and the liars who made up the false allegations were exposed, but even more, the enablers, the police officers, the bent lawyers and all the rest of it, who had actually encouraged and promoted and helped the liars to make the stories better, and they were all exposed too. And after that trial, I made a film called Guilty. All of those are available to be seen online, but I also made a couple of other films that were nothing to do with the false allegations industry, one of which used this Silver Cannon song as a major part of the story. And actually, I think it's quite fun, and I would urge you, now that you've got nothing to do, to turn it on. It's also free, and it's called Me, Me, Me. It's memememovie.com, and it's about a 90-minute movie. I'm only in it briefly. It mainly features actors who did a wonderful job, young people, and it's good fun. And after that, I made another one called The Pink Marble Egg, which you can also watch, which does feature me in a sort of James Bond type role. And my director, Paul Whiffin, bumped into Tom Hanks at one of those conventions and said to him, "Oh, we'd like to see the beginning of the film." And Tom Hanks said, "Oh, yes," he was bored of what was going on as well. And watched the first 5 minutes or so and said, "I have to tell you, that is my favourite record of all time. What is Jonathan King doing these days?" Well, Paul gave him a synopsis, I think leaving out some of the rather more unpleasant recent aspects. And Tom Hanks was over the moon. He said, "I've always loved that song." Anyway, to finish off, I thought I would play you another saccharine track that I put out, which I always thought was terrific. It didn't do a thing, but it was my version of the old standard song, Hang On Sloopy. See you tomorrow.